Get in, nerds. We're playing Victoria 3. Today we're going to be working on some just state management stuff, and that's going to start with going through our production methods. Just FYI, this is a new session. It's probably going to be a short one. We're probably only going to do one episode, but we're going to take a look at some production methods. Starting with the urban stuff, and I'm just going to be looking at anything that's got split production methods or production methods that I don't think are the greatest. We can see for government admin we're using basic org and filing cabinets for our government offices in Gotland and Schleswig-Holstein. I'm just going to switch both of those over to standardized filing system. That's going to take a little bit more paper. It looks like paper is pretty expensive in our market. I'm going to double check exactly how expensive. Paper is very expensive. It's going to take another 60 paper, but we can actually tolerate that change. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. That's going to get us a little bit of a buffer here on bureaucracy. So that's going to be worth it. I'm noticing we have a couple of urban centers in Scania and Gotland running gas street lights, and the rest of our urban centers do not have lit streets. Where are we with coal? Coal is very expensive, so I'm actually going to take those and drop them back. Really? You're going to be profitable. You're going to generate 342 more services. It's 114 more coal. So our maximum coal use is 260, which 114 more. That's gonna put us into a shortage. Where is services here? Services is here. We're just on balance with services. We're really, really balanced. So and we're gonna get 342 additional services running this way. It really does think that it's going to make these less productive. Well, that's wild. Well, maybe we'll make a goal of increasing this slowly. But slowly. In particular, I think Svealand is going to take forever because we got a ton of urban centers there on account of that's where all our industry is. So let's just go slow with that. Music player, you good? You doing good? Yeah, let's go on to the next one, shall we? There we go, much better. Just gonna leave this for now. I think we're good. We're basically right on balance for services, and so we're doing well. So I'm not gonna worry about that too much. Let's take a look at our arts academies here. Our arts academies are fully employed, and we are, I think, exporting arts. Yes. Oh no, we're buying our own art. Oh, that's wild. Cool. Let's see what else. For rural fishing wharves, we have a split ownership method. Yeah, okay, so all the places that went with the religious revolt moved to private. So private ownership will strengthen the capitalists, weaken the shopkeepers. Generally speaking, capitalists are going to align with the industrialists' interest group, shopkeepers with the petite bourgeoisie interest group. And I'm going to switch over to this because I think that's what I want. I've got the industrialists in government right now over here as opposed to in the opposition. So they're definitely the ones I want to strengthen. Our lead mines that we're going to be building are not using the atmospheric pump engine. I think I'm going to have them do that, but that's going to be a minute. Yes, I'm constructing them. All right, cool. And then finally, for livestock ranches, we've got one in Scania using slaughterhouses. That's outputting a ton of meat. It's going to be a lot more productive if we don't use all those tools. Because, again, tools are very, very expensive in our market right now. All right, so that's about that. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to take you through the states that we've got so that I can explain kind of where we're going to be prioritizing development as our peaceful city building Let's Play begins. So I'm just going to take a look at the population because this is going to give us a sense of where we're going to be concentrating anywhere we've got a large number of unemployed or subsistence workers. We're going to be developing. So Schleswig-Holstein, we've got 129,000. Jutland, 76,000, 1,000 unemployed. Zealand, about 85,000, of whom many are unemployed. So Zealand is a good development state. Skinia, 22,000 unemployed. Why do we have all this negative migration? Eastern Norway. They're going to Eastern Norway. Oh, that's fine. Gotland, we've got 140. We've been developing here, but we're going to continue doing that. 122 in Svealand, and Norland has about 37,000. And once again, we have Gotland over here with an insignificant number. We got some buildings in here that are... Well, these are fully employed. But just barely. In any case, so that's very good. The other thing I'm going to look at is infrastructure. And the way I'm going to do that is I'm going to go into the Build Railways interface. Yes, as I suspected, we have a state with low infrastructure, so I'm going to queue up a railway there. Again, you can see this in the little net infrastructure there next to market access in the Swedish market line. I'm just going to take a look at our infrastructure in other places. We've got 31 excess here, 14 excess in Jutland, 27 excess in Schleswig-Holstein, Gotland 21 excess, Sweden 38 excess, 1 excess in Norland. I'm going to hit this one for Norland, just make sure that gets built. I'm going to take these up to the top, but I still want these at the top. So do that nice and slow. With that having been said, we're still working down our deficit for a little more. Well, where are we? We're on high taxation. I think we can resume building. So let's go ahead and unpause and see what that does for our finances. Okay, financially we're still solvent. If we go down, that'll make us in a deficit, and I don't want that. So I'm just going to leave this here for now. I'm going to leave the taxes at high. It's not going to be ideal, but it's going to be, we're going to be doing what we need to do. Gosh, I really hope the public school thing works out right now, because I sure did fight a war over it. In terms of technology, we're about to finish out nationalism, and then there will be just one more step away from doing pan-nationalism. We'll probably wait on that a significant amount of time. Looking at nitroglycerin to increase. So what this will do is it'll provide a higher explosives generating method for our chemical plants, while at the same time adding methods that will use up explosives for our mines, but make them more productive. So that's definitely something we're looking into. The other thing, though, is thinking about pharmaceuticals next. I think that's going to go on to the end, because pharmaceuticals will allow us to have some private or public health insurance laws and health system, and that's something we're definitely going to want, because as a country with a fairly low population, we're going to be very reliant on having healthcare to keep our population growth high. So yeah, so that's where we are with that. Doing really well financially. Artistic expressions. A popular Swedish newsletter has released a statement by Rudolf Arrhenius endorsing several poets known for their sympathies to the industrialists' interests. The ideals of friendship and comradeship are present therein, but when one looks beyond the surface, one is faced with the precise conditions for such a thing, those things which foster the highest ideals, and can be made manifest in one's daily life. The idols of the Swedish culture stand behind our reforms. That's 7% enactment success chance. And then this one is the loyal support of the industrialists should be rewarded. It provides us with slightly less success chance, and makes the industrialists stronger and happier. I'm going to go with the second one. That's going to be useful for we're only sacrificing 2% success chance. And again, I feel extremely confident, but I like having the industrialists be happy with me. in particular because this ability is very, very useful. I haven't talked about these abilities yet. I think I'm going to go through that at some point. But for now, I'll probably do a whole thing where I'll talk about the ideologies of the various interest groups, and at the same time I'll talk about the abilities, which is what you get for when they're happy or unhappy. In fact, I think now might be a good time to do that. Yeah, I think we're basically chilling. So you've got 8 total interest groups. You've already met the Church of Sweden. And we've talked a little bit about the intelligentsia already. But to... Something else? Okay. We're finished improving relations with Austria. So let's start improving relations with Russia now. Russia we're doing very well with. Oh, Prussia will do a defensive pact now. Excellent. Let's mutually defend ourselves. Let's mutually defend each other. May very well end up placing me in a bad situation, but France, we're cordial. Yeah, we're improving. We're doing better. Belgium, ooh. Yeah, they don't want to be in our customs union. It's good to have countries in your customs union. Oh, that's right. Yes, I'm building up lead mines. The thing I need to do is get... Excellent. Thank you, Prussia. The thing I need to do is to get these lead mines, chemical plants, and munitions plants all finished around the same time, so that I can get them all going at once. And then I can switch over my barracks over to the skirmisher production method. And that'll just be excellent for our overall security situation. We've still got a lot of radicals. This is definitely going to go down over time, but for now it's going to be quite difficult for us to get things done. I'm hoping that increasing public school access will help deal with that radicalization problem a little bit. I do have enough bureaucracy to increase law enforcement investment. I think I'm going to go ahead and do that. So that'll take a year, and we'll get fewer radicals and fewer state penalties from turmoil, and that's going to be useful. So, yes, I was talking about government interest groups. So, first we'll talk about the industrialists. We're going to be relying on them a lot. Again, our blue ideology over here is because of the leader, but these are their regular ideologies. So, number 1 is plutocratic. Under distro power, they like oligarchy and wealth voting. They're neutral on technocracy, landed voting, census suffrage, and single-party state. They oppose autocracy, and they strongly oppose universal suffrage and anarchy. So that's a little bit strange and arbitrary. It's not just kind of they like authoritarian stuff and dislike egalitarian stuff. It's a little bit more complicated than that. But the short version is they like anything that gives them a lot of power. Governance principles, they're neutral on monarchy, presidential republic, and parliamentary republic, but they dislike theocracy and they really dislike council republic. Nothing complicated there. Taxation, they like per capita. Excellent. Taxation, they like per capita taxation. They dislike consumption-based, land-based, and proportional, and they oppose graduated. So, to go through our tax laws a little bit, I'm just going to kind of show you what's going on with that. So this is our taxation scale. Consumption-based is built around the idea that all of the taxes are going to be consumption taxes. So what that's going to mean is that we're not going to tax anything other than the various things we tax consumption on over here. Below that is land-based, and that's a little bit deceptive. What it really means is land use-based. So these are taxes that are levied largely by the landowners on the subsistence class. So that's what that means. The land tax is levied on peasants, which again are those workers working in subsistence jobs. It also has a very small income tax rate. Next is per capita taxation. As you can see, it's got double the income tax rate of land-based. Land-based has 8.5% income tax. Per capita has 17.5%. Sorry, 17.5% income tax. They've got equal consumption tax rates. This one has 0.85 land tax. This one has 0.42 land tax, so that's half. But it also has 0.85 per capita tax. That's a flat tax that's charged everyone. Rousing speech captivates the public. This afternoon, Martin Hallenborg, leader of the intelligentsia, delivered a fiery speech advocating for the enactment of public schools. Making an appearance before the public in Stockholm's main square, Martin Hallenborg's powerful rhetoric left even his most embittered political opponents impressed. Excerpts from the speech are already being circulated across Sweden, fanning the fires of an already roaring debate. We can get 15% enactment chance, or performances like this reflect well on Martin Hallenborg and his cause. Martin Hallenborg is the leader of the intelligentsia. We're going to get, I think we're going to do this one. We're going to get slightly less enactment chance, but we're also going to get popularity and power for the intelligentsia. And again, those guys are in our government, and that's a good thing for us. We recently had rifling spread to us. I'm just going to go ahead and switch the production method for our arms industries over to rifles. It's going to use steel rather than iron, but that's going to be just fine. Sorry, we got an event for that. One more moment, and then I'll talk about taxes again. The change in large-scale production, from smoothbore muskets to rifles in the arms industries in Scania, has ushered in a new era for small arms production in Sweden. Even from 1,000 yards, you can still take the shot. Forward artillery positions can be harassed, bayonet charges stopped before they've even commenced. The advantages are innumerable. Unless we develop sufficient manufacturing capabilities to produce these weapons, we are bound to face disaster on the battlefield. So, option 1 is the Heisenberg arsenal should be famed throughout the world. That gives additional migration attraction in Scania and arms industries throughput for 9 years. Or Sweden should be at the forefront of military innovation, which gives us a much smaller industry throughput bonus, half as much migration attraction, but it gives us 4,500 innovation on repeaters, which is the next gun technology. I think we're going to take that. Especially when you're starting out as a country that's not fully industrialized at the beginning, it's better to start with getting. It's good to work on getting those lovely tech bonuses. Right, back to taxation. So those are the 3 types of taxation that we've unlocked. Comparing per capita to proportional, proportional has a much higher income tax rate, 30% versus 17.5%. And this is just what they are at high. These are going to change if we go to medium, but they change proportionally. So it's still, comparing them is still basically accurate. Proportional cuts out land tax completely. And then it adds a 15% dividends tax, which is tax on excess revenue from buildings that's distributed amongst the pops that have ownership shares of those buildings. So this one's a taxation that's much more oriented towards the upper classes paying disproportionately, and the middle and working class is paying less. From there, you go to graduated, which is back down to 17.5% income rate for this one, and 25% dividends rate. So again, that means that a good amount of the taxes are under proportional, or under graduated, are being generated by business revenue rather than individual income. So, going back to what the industrialists want, then, they want per capita taxation, they don't like graduated taxation, and they're neutral on everything else, which is fine. Stance on colonization, they like colonial exploitation. They dislike no colonial affairs and only colonial resettlement. Again, we're not going to worry about colonization that much. I don't think we're going to worry about it at all, frankly. Next is laissez-faire, and this is their kind of economic policy. In terms of economic system, they support laissez-faire, which is a basically unregulated capitalism. They like interventionism just fine, which is regulated capitalism. They're neutral on agrarianism, which is pastoral capitalism. Oppose traditionalism, which is kind of... No, we're done improving relations with Russia. Traditionalism kind of represents regressive economic regimes, basically. And we're still improving relations with France. I'm going to go ahead and improve relations with... This is Hanover? Hanover. Where was I? And then they dislike cooperative ownership, command economy, and industry banned. None of that should be rocket science, because they're capitalists. They don't want the workers to own their businesses. They want to own their businesses. They don't want the government to own their businesses. They want to own their businesses. They don't want nobody to have businesses. They want to have businesses. That's what the capitalists like. They want to industrialize. In terms of trade policy, they like free trade. They're neutral on mercantilism. They dislike protectionism, and they strongly dislike isolationism. Again, this kind of makes sense because a lot of them get their money from businesses selling goods, particularly selling goods abroad. So they want to be able to trade cheaply. For children's rights, they like child labor being allowed. They're neutral on restrictions on child labor, and they oppose compulsory primary school. These ones are not intuitive, but basically these later ones increase the limits of education investment. So right now I'm investing in level 3 education over here in my institutions. That's as high as I can go right now. If I want to get access to these levels, I'm going to need to invest in getting the kids out of jobs and into the classroom. All right, come on, public schools. A social club popular with the educated class is held a salon in Stockholm, with Rudolf Arrhenius speaking in favor of public schools as an honored guest. That is indubitably the case. But have you considered what the reception of such a thing would be? Arrhenius nodded towards the speaker, then back around the wooden paneled room. He put down his cup. I have spent some time thinking of it. We must in all things consider the thoughts of those who will behold a thing for the first time. A first viewing is carried out with the eyes of an innocent, with mind open for new possibilities. The option 1 is they seem to know what's best. It's just 10% enactment chance. Encourage the further development of these salons. Gives us smaller enactment chance of extra qualifications and pop strength. It's a little bit of an odd duck. I'm going to do it. Let's see how that affects things. Alright. Finally. Labor rights, they like no workers' rights. They oppose regulatory bodies. They strongly oppose workers' protections. Again, that's not shocking. The more of these you do, theoretically, although this doesn't happen in the game, the less... Well, it does happen in the game. The more of these you do, the less productive their factories are. For values of productive equal to profitable. They're more productive in the sense that, especially workers' protections, gives workers extra income, increased minimum wage, and that's very important. Finally, for land reform, and this refers to who owns the agricultural businesses. They like commercialized agriculture. They're neutral on tenant farmers and homesteading. They oppose serfdom, and they strongly oppose collectivized agriculture. These ones, because all they say is enables and disables production methods, it's not exactly clear what they do, but I'm just going to walk you through it, basically. Serfdom means it's all owned by landowners, by aristocrats. Tenant farmers means it's mostly owned by aristocrats, and some of them owned by capitalists. Commercialized agriculture means it's all owned by capitalists. Homesteading means it's mostly owned by capitalists, aristocrats, but a bunch of farmers as well. And then collectivized agriculture is... I think it's owned, allows for both command economy and cooperative. And the Yeah, so it allows workers' cooperatives and government-run. Workers' cooperatives means shopkeepers and farmers, and government-run means bureaucrats. Government-run's also a little bit of an odd duck. We'll end up talking about that at a later point. And then finally, these guys are individualists. For welfare, they like having poor laws, and they dislike other forms of social welfare. Poor laws are, again, I don't know if we talked about this, they're kind of the 19th century version of welfare. They provide welfare payments, but they also reduce political strength when receiving welfare, and that's not ideal. Did I finish those lead mines? I did. Well, that's a little silly. I did a silly, that's for sure. Well, it happens. So, that's their sense on welfare. Their sense on health and education is they like the privatized version, basically. Their sense on migration, finally, is they don't like migration controls, and they really don't like closed borders, and they're happy when there's no migration controls, because they like people being able to do whatever's the best for themselves individually. We're developing a bit of a gold reserve. I am going to keep our taxes a little high, because I want to keep this... I want to stay in the black, make sure we've got plenty of money. Wonderful. An extra influence out of that. Reduce bureaucracy cost. That's not bad. Large numbers of Danish people have big... Oh, why are they going over there? They should stay in Denmark. Gosh, I don't like that. I don't know why we're getting... Where are they migrating from? Wow. Why is standard of living here so bad? Well, I guess it's that unemployment. Well, we'll work on it. It's a thing we'll work on. We're still developing a lot of stuff in Svaland, which we'll definitely need to keep doing. But it's a process. We've got to get things together so that the army can function. Right. So that's the industrialists. They're going to be very useful in the early game and the mid game, and they're going to potentially oppose a lot of the things that we want in the late game. Next, there's the armed forces. We're having another discussion. North German students sometimes use their native language in Swedish schools. Some have called for teachers to penalize the use of these languages, forcing children to speak the official language of Sweden. You've noticed it too, right? He gets angry when anyone talks in class, but he always gets angrier when we're talking. Maybe he thinks we're talking about him. I think he just doesn't like being reminded that we know something he doesn't. Schools should teach them to speak the proper language. This radicalizes German pops, gives us extra assimilation and extra radicals from discrimination, and their language is part of their heritage. It gives reduced assimilation, reduced radicals from discrimination. It makes the Church of Sweden and the petite bourgeoisie salty. Church of Sweden is still very angry about a lot of things, but I really don't want to pick up more radicals, so I think that's what we're going to need to do. You can reduce assimilation, that's not that big of a deal. Still got an engines shortage. Can we get engines anywhere else? Yeah, we can get some from Prussia. Wonderful. Eventually we'll have our own motor industries, but for now, we do not. Alright. We've hit 1847. Finally. Alright. That's wonderful. So that'll really help us. So next in law changes. You don't have any home affairs, and I think we really, really need home affairs. Gosh. Church of Sweden's going to get mad about this too. Happily, they're not strong enough to rebel. Go to this. The armed forces are going to be bothered, and the petite bourgeoisie are going to be bothered, but they're both pretty okay. I don't think either of them is going to start a movement against it. So I think that's going to be where we go next. Well, I don't know. I don't want to do too much too fast. Oh, homesteading. Oh, that'll radicalize the landowners. Gosh, that's something I don't want. If we go to poor laws, the landowners will be salty about that. The trade unions won't love it. But it will improve our overall standard of living. Currently have right of assembly. That's good. Trade policy is still mercantilism. We could go to free trade. The landowners would be very upset about that. But I think for now, I want to change the distribution of power. Why is the Church of Sweden so upset about census suffrage? You see, the industrialists dislike this one. Landed voting, because that makes them less powerful. If we go to wealth voting, only the landowners oppose that. Let's do it. This will be a little rough initially, but it will ultimately make it faster to move to a more higher level of enfranchisement, and I think that's going to be really important. I'm going to put these munition plants up here. Let's go back up to speed 3. Oh no, I'm still talking about governments. You know, I haven't been very fast talking about interest groups, but you know, it's a long process. So next we'll talk about the armed forces. They have 3, jingoist, loyalist, and patriotic. Jingoist means they like a professional army. They're okay with mass conscription. They dislike national militia and peasant levies. And they like colonizing. They're equal on resettlement versus exploitation. So the army model basically means professional army is a professional army, a standing army. Mass conscription is still a solid standing army, but with a much higher rate of conscription of these mass infantry and artillery units. Mass conscription is generally a late-game technology. It represents what a lot of people were doing in kind of World War I. National militia, peasant levies is a very traditional army model. It's basically the idea that like lords and landowners form the officer corps and kind of command all the people that come from the same town that they own. That's peasant levy. It's not great. The landowners like it, but it's not great for everything else. Finally, national militia is an interesting one. It's a very small standing army with a really, really high conscription rate. It lets you raise huge numbers of battalions all throughout your country. And that's very... so it's interesting. Anyway, the armed forces dislike this because they want to have a professional army with a large armed force, because that's what they are. Loyalists, this is just about taxation. They prefer a form of taxation where the government is functional and makes enough money to do stuff. And they're against land-based and consumption-based, which are the others. Finally, patriotic is they like heavier, more authoritarian forms of internal security and police forces. Militarized police, they like a lot. Dedicated police, they like just fine. Local police, they're neutral about, and no police, they oppose. Internal security, they like National Guard and secret police. They're opposed to no home affairs and guaranteed liberties. And then their stance on free speech is they like dissent to be outlawed. They like censorship. They're neutral on right of assembly, and they oppose protected speech. Okay, so these are generally very, very kind of civil liberties negative types. The intelligentsia, their traits are liberal, anti-clerical, republican, anti-slavery. We've talked a little bit about these guys, but just to go over them briefly again, anti-slavery is they're against slavery. Not going to really matter for our country. We don't have slavery, and we're never gonna. For land reform, they're against serfdom. They're neutral about all the other stuff. Anti-clerical is they prefer the public and private versions of education and to the religious ones. For your bureaucracy, they're against hereditary bureaucracy and therefore appointed bureaucracy. They're neutral about elected. They'll be fine if you've got elected bureaucrats. And then for church and state, they like total separation. They like freedom of conscience, less than that. They're neutral towards state atheism by default, and they oppose state religion. There's a separate ideology called nihilist that's, I think, going to be for state atheism. I think. I'm not sure, though. That might have changed in the patch. Or not changed. It's not changed in the patch. It wasn't the thing before. It was added during the patch. Moving right along here. So those are the three simple ones. Republican is for governing principles. They like republics. They're neutral about theocracy and monarchy, and they oppose council republics, but they're very happy in a republic. And finally, for distribution of power, they like census suffrage and universal suffrage. They like wealth voting a little bit less than that. Landed voting and single-party state and technocracy, they like less than that. And they oppose oligarchy, autocracy, and anarchy. So these are the guys that are eventually going to help us move from wealth voting to universal or census suffrage. So we're going to work on that. Oh, we've got to move into do homesteading, though. No, but that's going to make our landowners very, very mad. We got a lot of radicals in the landowners, so I'd rather not piss them off, because they're also very strong. Again, part of the reason we're moving away from oligarchy is because oligarchy is making them very powerful. And we'd like them to be weaker before we get into a situation where we're going to piss them off enough that they might raise a rebellion, because we don't want to have to deal with that. Time to talk about the landowners. They are... Oh, gosh. Now they've got a movement together. You stop that. Cut that out, landowners. No one likes that. And so what is that going to do for this? It's going to increase our stall chance. Hopefully we'll be able to get this done. Anyway. So, they're paternalistic, stratocratic, and patriarchal. Patriarchal just means they oppose rights of women. They're against free speech. Whatever the other one that the armed forces have, they like outlawed dissent and censorship. They're neutral on right of assembly, and they oppose protected speech. Stratocratic, the other thing about they're against rights of women. Stratocratic means, so the description is this group favors maintaining a hierarchy in society through traditional forms of taxation and labor relations. In practice, what this means is they like a lot of the things that are just good for them and bad for everyone else. A lot of these things that they endorse here give them power. Particularly peasant levies, again, is the organization of armed forces that makes them stronger, because it puts them in charge of the army. Land reform is they like serfdom and tenant farmers, and they dislike the other stuff. They're neutral on commercialized agriculture. We'll probably end up going to that, but they're against homesteading. Taxation, they like consumption-based and land-based. They're neutral on per capita. They oppose proportional, and they strongly oppose graduated. So again, these are the ones that are at the top of the list. Per capita is in the middle, and these are the ones that are the more progressive taxes down below. Stance on welfare is they're against it. They prefer no social security. They're okay with poor laws, but they oppose wage subsidies and old age pensions. And then, so that's stratocratic. Then paternalistic. This is the kind of complicated one. The group has little faith in the populace attempting to govern itself, believing they need the guidance of a traditional aristocracy. So, this means governance principles. They like monarchy and theocracy, and they're against republics of all kinds. Distro power, they like landed voting and autocracy. Those are the things that make them strongest. They like oligarchy, okay, neutral about single-party state and wealth voting. And they oppose census suffrage and strongly oppose universal suffrage, anarchy, and technocracy, interestingly. Well, I guess that makes sense, because technocracy means they'll lose out a lot of power to the industrialists and the intelligentsia. For your bureaucracy, they like hereditary. They're against appointed and elected. Stance on policing is they like the local police, because again, the local police answer to them rather than the central government. Economic system, they like traditionalism, they like agrarianism, okay, and they're against laissez-faire, industry-banned cooperative ownership and command economy. Finally, their trade policy is they like isolation and mercantilism, and they oppose free trade. Most of the things we want to do to move forward and industrialize the country, they're going to oppose. So that's basically their situation. The rural folk are interesting. They're agrarian, which means they like an agrarian economic system. They oppose cooperative ownership, laissez-faire, and command economy, but they're neutral about all the other forms of capitalism, as opposed to laissez-faire, which they hate. Stance on land reform, they like homesteading, which makes sense because there are a lot of farmers, and that makes farmers own the farms. Yeah, a lot of progressive consideration. That's excellent. They strongly oppose serfdom, and they oppose tenant farmers. They're neutral about commercialized versus collectivized agriculture. And then taxation, they like consumption-based. They oppose per capita, proportional, and graduated, and they really oppose land-based, because in land-based, the tax burden largely falls on them. Inefficient agriculture. We've seen this event before a lot. I'm just going to tell the industrialists to stuff it. Moving right along, particularists is a funny one, but basically they oppose debt slavery, and they oppose basically anything that would let the government tell them what to do. They don't want to have a big professional army. They don't want to have mass conscription or peasant levy. And they don't want to have police. They don't like to be policed. They're the rural folk. It makes a lot of sense. Finally, isolationists. They don't want to be colonizing. They like closed borders. They like migration controls. They like isolation and protection and trade policy, and they dislike free trade. Again, this makes a certain amount of sense when you look at sort of rural politics. Protectionism is very important to rural communities. They don't have these big, commercial agribusinesses. They're built around, small farms. That's their model for what a well-constructed society looks like. And then finally, we have the petite bourgeoisie. Their traits are reactionary, meritocratic, and patriotic. Patriotic is just the same as the armed forces one. They like a lot of authoritarian forms of policing, internal security, and free speech laws. Meritocratic is they like elected bureaucrats. They dislike hereditary bureaucrats, and they're neutral and appointed. The taxation one, though, is very relevant to us because they like proportional. They're the only group right now that does. They like it just as much as per capita, and then they dislike the other ones. So they're going to eventually be useful to us when we try to move to either proportional to proportional. I don't know if we're going to move to graduated. Finally, they're reactionary. On citizenship, they strongly endorse national supremacy. They endorse ethno-state and racial segregation. They're neutral about cultural exclusion, and they oppose multiculturalism. Okay, so they like a tighter citizenship setup. They don't, by default, endorse ethno-state, but they will end up doing so a lot in the late game, because this is the interest group that tends towards ethno-nationalist and fascist ideologies. Governance principles, they like monarchy and theocracy. They dislike republics. And finally, on migration, they like having migration controls and closed borders. So, speaking very broadly, as we get going in the game, we're going to be doing a lot of work with the industrialists and the intelligentsia, and we're not going to be doing so much work with the petite bourgeoisie, armed forces, and landowners. The rural folk are going to go kind of either way. It's going to depend a lot on the individual ideologies of those groups. So that's kind of how we're doing things. Interestingly, a liberal revolt has occurred in America, in the Northeast. This is probably the American Civil War. Let's look at their politics. These guys are slavery banned. These guys are legacy slavery. Oh, that's right. I don't remember if we talked about this already, but America has moved to a presidential dictatorship. Oh, interestingly, they both are. America no longer has voting in either the secessionist abolitionist states or the loyalist slaveholding states. That's interesting. What an unusual situation. Maybe this will affect us in a way where our people will stop trying to move to America. I'll be pleased with that. I know we've got kind of high taxes. I think we can afford to drop them back. With that having been said, let's throw one more consumption tax down, since we've got the necessary authority. All these are producing quite a bit. Yeah, let's tax wine. That's just going to give us a little bit more of a buffer, and the reason that's going to matter is because once we get these factories done, we're going to be switching over to having a more expensive type of military. I think actually, though, we're going to be producing one more construction industry. I'm going to pop that all the way up to the top. That's going to take a little bit of time to get built, but it's going to speed us up in terms of building. We've got a lot of wealth in the investment pool, so we'll be able to use more with that. Here's hoping we get wealth voting. We had very good luck so far and didn't have any nonsense. We're going to basically get an election as soon as that happens, and we're going to see who we wind up running the country after that, assuming we can make this happen and not have a situation where the landowners in the Church of Sweden decide to fight us over it. Gosh. If we reform our current government, pop these guys out of it, that will not help. We're currently in kind of a weird place with our government legitimacy, but hopefully once we get this done, we'll be in a better spot. Alright, so we're building a little bit faster now. That's going to cost us a little bit more money, but that's okay. Again, our finances are very good at this point. We've got a large gold reserve. And that is where we want to be. Interestingly, the private sector has not been producing a lot of tooling industries, which I was hoping they would do on account of tools are very expensive here. But and the private industry just tends to kind of build whatever's profitable, which is, again, the way you would expect private industry to work. But they haven't been doing so much of that. As you can see, our building speed is going up a little bit as we go here. And correspondingly, we're spending a little bit more cash each week as the new construction sector gets more and more employed. So I think it's probably fully employed now. Where did I build it? I built it in Scania, right? No. Here. Yeah, it's getting more employed. Cool. Without a clause, the armed forces and the rural folk are split over the semantics of a clause regarding wealth voting. Rodolfo Arrhenius is happy to let this bickering continue. I will call attention to the statute forbidding the bearing of armor within the mighty institution. What's the issue this time? The wording does not specify whether one is only wearing armor if one possesses it within the premises. One might simply be carrying an ornament, and thus in breach of the law. I think this is very silly. Favor the armed forces interpretation, that makes them stronger. Promote the rural folks' stance. Censure Rodolfo Arrhenius for encouraging this behavior. Well, I don't want to censor him. Let's make the armed forces stronger for now. We're eventually going to have problems with them as we try to get more liberal civil rights type laws, but for now... Oh! Canvas of ideas. Oh, I dislike these events. I think you should be able to turn them off. The intelligentsia find it difficult to find the cheap paper they need to immortalize their thoughts. The only upside of this wretched state of affairs, the professor said with an exasperated sigh, is that when someone says an idea is not worth the paper it's printed on, they at least mean it. We will secure the pages of tomorrow's classics, set up a paper import, learn brevity, anger the intelligentsia. I'm going to do this. We're going to import some paper. This is just something we have to deal with. Hooray. We did it. Now the intelligentsia won't be mad. Again, that's just one of those events that we end up having to deal with. We're getting these chemical plants. Let's go ahead and slide the munitions plants back up to the first spot. Again, I want to finish these at the same time so that they'll be productive together. Because the munitions plants really need the chemical plants in order to function. I like to have... Normally I could import ammunition and explosives, but that's what we're currently doing. But that's not great. I prefer to have as much autarky as possible in those areas, with autarky referring to the idea that we kind of do our own thing. We support our own interests. Are we on good terms with Britain? Yes, we sure are. We're on good terms with Austria? We sure are. Alright, I think we're doing pretty okay diplomatically. Let's go ahead and start improving relations with some slightly less nearby people. Get those things going. With that having been said, it has been a pretty productive 2 years. We're working on reforming the franchise. We've got our finances sorted out. We've increased our construction capacity, and we're well on our way to having a native arms industry that can support a better army, as well as having a native motor industry that can support our burgeoning railway empire. So I am feeling very productive about today. I've had fun. I hope you've had fun. I know there was a lot of explaining, but it is what it is. This is a very complicated game. And yeah, I'll see you all on the other side.